Freaking Out with Billy Hume?
Yep.
All right. Good.
Why did you get into music?
Honestly, my father was in the band, and my oldest brother, whom I looked up to, was in the band, and he listened to music. He was the one buying all the records and stuff as a teenager in high school when I was in elementary school. So I looked up to him. So I wanted to do everything he did, which he was in the band as well. And he did the Michael Jackson. So
What did you give up to do music?
You kind of give up everything to do music the right way, especially when you're learning music. Like, you don't have time for anything else. So, you know, it's funny. You don't even realize you're giving it up because you have no interest in it over music. Hindsight, you look back and say, I could have done other things instead of music, but I wouldn't change it.
How did you prepare your life for this career? Is there anything that you did intentionally knowing that you were going to do this?
That's a great question. But no, I think for me, everything was a natural progression from picking up the trumpet on to DJing. It was just my interest led me to the different aspects of my career, even before it became a career. You know, I had a natural interest in DJing when I heard the scratches on my first 2 Live Crew record. It was just a natural instinct that, like, what is that? I want to do that. So it wasn't a preparation, because you got to think, back then we didn't know this was going to be a career. We were just doing it.
So you kind of got into this more like just for fun, as opposed to like, hey, I'm focused on having a career.
For the love. I would say more for the love of it, more so than fun. I mean, music is fun. Like, how could you do music and it not be fun? So that kind of goes without saying. But I think that's why I'm still doing it, because if I didn't love it, there's no way in the hell I'd still be doing it.
That's for sure.
The way hip hop kind of fell over my head, I tell people this story about the first time I heard "Throw the Dick" by the 2 Live Crew. I was at a house party in my neighborhood. My brother and sister, who were in the same grade, were like 2 years over me. So I was at a house party for their friend, and "Throw the Dick" came on, and it was just blaring through the speakers, right? And so the mix on it, just before I even knew what a mix was, it just sounded so raw. And when at the end of the record, those old comedy records that Mr. Mix used to scratch in those 2 Live Crew records, with the moans and the yells and the vulgar phrases, I had never heard before. And when I heard that coming over those speakers, for some reason I remember walking up some stairs when it was playing for the first time, and it felt like God was talking to me. Like, really, it was a moment like going to change your life. And for me, I remember that, especially by it being so long ago, and it might not even happen the way I remember it, but I remember it that way. That record changed me forever. Like, yo, and even when you listen to the type of music that I made, I wound up making, I was heavily influenced by that record, which made me get into the group 2 Live Crew and Luke, you know. So that right there was probably, and it might be my first memory of something that really influenced me to get into hip hop.
Yeah, I actually remember one time we were working on a track. There was that period of time when we were doing a lot of tracks together, and we'd have like Ruby there and Jake sometimes. And sometimes you'd come in and you would like have something you wanted to listen to start the session off, just to kind of get in the mood. And you were playing some 2 Live Crew. We were sitting there and just looking at the screen, just staring at it. And you looked at me and said, if you ever want to understand me, why I do this and what this is all about, and you just pointed at the screen, that's it. And I was just thinking, it kind of hit me, because to me it's like Dark Side of the Moon and shit like that, you know, Pink Floyd. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. It was actually really informative, but it's interesting what things get people, like, what is that key thing that triggers in your head and makes you go, wow. What made you?
In what way? As a musician? As a what? Like, that's a big question.
People are made up of all these different parts. And like, I was raised by a colonel in the Army, and that has a lot to do with my whole life, you know, growing up on Army bases. So it's kind of like, what made you?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Honestly, I'm a bit of an introvert. And so I'm a person who, once I lock into something, nothing else matters. So the fact that you said your father was in the military or whatever, my parents were just very supportive. The fact that I admired my family members, namely my older brother, just watching him and wanting to do everything that he did, even from him buying the 12 inches, not as a DJ, but back when 12 inches and records, the 12 inches in particular, the singles, when they were popular, he would buy, he had all that shit. And a lot of those records, I wound up mixing and sampling as I got into the business. But I guess just really watching what he did and the beginning of hip hop for all of us, going to the skating rinks and experiencing music, how rap was kind of new and not accepted by older people. And it was, I guess, when you start thinking about what makes you, I think all of that stuff was working together at one time. Because it was like going to Mars and not knowing shit. And you land on the planet, and then you got the person who brought you, who's showing you around, and then it's shit you discover on your own, and all of these things influence how you live or how you're gonna survive on this planet. And that's, I guess, if you ask me what made me, because I had some great mentors. I came up under a lot of influential people for the time, from the DJ crew that I started with J here in Atlanta, and MC Shadi, who introduced me to the record business as his tour DJ and producer. So man, I got a lot of good lessons on the way up, in addition to what I just discovered on my own, so to speak. So it's a lot that goes into that question. We could do a whole episode just on that question. That was a great question.
I remember when we were when the Ying Yang Twins were just having a lot of hits, they were kind of at their peak. They kind of rode for a while. It was going for a while. And during that whole time, I remember you would leave, if we were working during the day, you would leave to go to your kids' like softball. You said to me, because of that, you couldn't compete the way some other people had to compete, because some people sacrifice everything for their career. But you didn't. You stayed focused. The other thing that you did is that you focused on fewer artists instead of like signing a bunch of people. Like people in Atlanta would come and they'd get something going on. They'd get a label deal like you got, but they'd go sign 10 artists, and you didn't do that. So my question is, can you speak about your philosophy regarding your life-career balance and how you focused on your goals?
So when you ask me what did I give up for the career, I think that question is backwards. Is what I gave up career-wise for my family. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and my parents are still married. And so family always meant something to me. And so I sacrificed more on my career-wise to be a part of my family. I'm still, that relationship that I have with my kids, and it's still it's still not what it could have been if I wasn't in the music business. But you can't get that shit back. Once your kids become who they are, you can't get that back. And your absence during those important years of their growth, you just can't get it back. And so I just never want to be the dad. Like I just watched the documentary on David Foster, and his, it was incredible, because I'm looking at him talk about his shortcomings with his kids and how he regretted it. Like, and I was like, damn, that would have been me. He sounded like what I didn't want to sound like. And his accolades are just enormous. Like, I didn't know he did half the shit that documentary told me, but I wouldn't want all of that from a career if my kids thought I was a piece of shit. It's not a trade-off to me. It's what makes you whole, man. What makes you happy at the end of the day. That's what this music shit is. I mean, if you're just gonna dive into it and that's all there is to it, and you don't enjoy it, that's another regret. I wish I had, even outside of just doing the music and being present for my family, I never took time out to really breathe and really enjoy it in the middle of it while it was going on. That's a regret. That's a regret.
The second part of my question was the fact that you didn't go out and sign a bunch of different artists like everybody else did. You stayed really focused on mostly the Ying Yang Twins and a few projects here and there.
I remember seeing an interview with Dr. Dre before I got into the industry part of it. And I remember him, something about the interview of him just working on his artists. It was something that he said where his focus, he rather focus on his shit. And that kind of stuck with me. Because when you pour if you pour your energy into something like that, especially when you have a label, it would even be different if I was just a producer, but I was, as you know, everything. So when you wearing all those hats for your one situation, as opposed to just going in the studio and knocking out some songs, you have to be focused. I don't think, I think I'm answering my own question just from thinking it through, because I never really looked at it like that. You don't have time to, because if I had done any less than what I had done with Ying Yang Twins, and them personally, I had to keep them focused. It was that kind of relationship that I felt like I had to have for them. And even moving before I got my deal with Interscope, for different reasons, because I was producing more. After me and Ying Yang split, that's when I started doing all the Bubba Sparks and all the other stuff. But when I got the deal with Interscope, I had a meeting with Jimmy Iovine, and he made that point of, because he had everybody signed over there, me, Pharrell, Swiss, Dre, Timbaland. Nobody's putting out records. And he was frustrated with that. And his thing was, why would you go give all your hits to somebody else? You're gonna make a couple of dollars, somewhere else, but just think if you gave it to your artist that's signed to your label, just think what you would get out of that. And that made me think like, so to start thinking long, as opposed to, because I was making some nice money, hitting the studio with these acts. Wasn't no love in it, honestly. And I always felt like it was free money, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But it made me say, okay, if I want to be a successful label, and this is before I signed Soulja Boy, I got to lock in and really put that record man hat on, which took me out of my creative mode, which I wouldn't do it different, but I'm split on having regret about that, because I love doing music. And when I figured out that I was sick of the record man hat, you can't just go back to doing music like that, because as a creator, you already know shit got to be working right inside of you for you to get back to that place where you can create again. So it's been a journey. It's been a interesting journey.
I actually remember a point in the studio you were talking about like L.A. Reid or something like that, or somebody, and you said, that guy just sits up there and he just pushes a button, basically, like, symbolically, and makes things happen. You said, I want to be the guy that pushes the button. And I got it, but I do remember after having so many amazing sessions with you that were just really cool, creative sessions, I thought, okay, but he's going to miss, he's going to miss this fun stuff. I know it, Right. I could tell that. And then, since I've seen you coming back around to this, it's really cool to see.
It's you're torn, man. That's why you have your L.A. Reid and Babyface, your Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. When you got a this and a that, because it's hard to be creative and handle the business. I was trying to explain to a friend of mine that almost never happens. You're never going to find somebody who's extremely creative running a fucking business. It just don't work. You can't cut that switch on and off. When it's time to create, you want to lock in. You don't want to talk to nobody else. If they have nothing to do with the music, we'll get to that later. The bills will be overdue. Yep. That's been my biggest struggle